Hello, everyone. I'm Susan Locke, welcoming you to this February edition of Citizens Bulletin with our host, Ashley Klingensmith, who is the Pennsylvania State Director for Americans for Prosperity. Hi, Ashley.
Susan, good morning. How are you?
I am well, thank you. It's great to hear your voice, and we really look forward to these reports. Each month, Ashley brings timely reports about the work and efforts being done by Americans for Prosperity, which is one of the largest grassroots organizations in Pennsylvania and the United States. So please let us know, Ashley, what you have planned for today.
Wonderful. I have a special guest. I'm going to introduce her in just 1 minute. But as always, I hope I find you listeners, navigating this new year in health and wellness. And if you will just go back a month with me, go back in time and remember the discussion that we had around our federal priorities during this first 100 days of this new 117th Congress. That would be fantastic. We're going to pick up on that theme in just a couple of moments, speaking about economic recovery and a policy that is imperative to defeat if we want to realize as robust a recovery as possible. But I want to introduce my guest first. I have Erica Jedniak on the line. She serves as the Director of Economic Opportunity for Stand Together. As a social entrepreneur, she directs national strategy and external affairs for Stand Together's economic opportunity portfolio, tackling the tough challenges like addressing the country's fiscal crisis and building a stronger workforce. She is a spokesperson for economic empowerment issues, managing awareness and policy reform campaigns. She's been published in the Wall Street Journal and Forbes, has appeared on Fox Business as well. She has led workforce initiatives for Stand Together, where she has really built a robust labor reform portfolio, which is going to lend perfectly to what we're going to discuss today. But she served actually as the former New Jersey State Director of Americans for Prosperity, where she was recognized as one of New Jersey Globe's top 100 most powerful people. And so she has been voted by as top young female talent on the right by Save Jersey, has been named to Insider NJ's Power 100 list. She still resides in Morris County, New Jersey with her husband. And so she is from right across the bridge. So Erica, it's so awesome to have you. Thanks so much.
Ashley, thank you so much for having me.
Cool. Well, as I said, we're going to pick up where we left off last month, talking about what we need to do to recover stronger than ever and emerge a leading nation after the pandemic has, after we are able to get the pandemic under control. And so, we know first that we have to be able to stop the virus. And second, then we have to be able to get folks back to work, to get this economy moving again and help this country emerge from the pandemic stronger. All of that while we're defending against policies that are going to undermine recovery. And so when we talked last month about clearing the way for people to get back to work quickly and safely, one of the things we said was that we need to be focused on expanding opportunities to employment by kind of eliminating all the unnecessary occupational licenses that exist, and by rejecting legislation like the PRO Act that would end right-to-work policies across the nation and kind independent contractor opportunities. So Erica, I am going to turn it over to you to give, a kind of a high level briefing of what the PRO Act is, some of its history in Congress last session, and then kind of share with us where we are now. And then I'll have a couple of follow-up questions for you, but the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ashley. And the PRO Act stands for the Protecting the Right to Organize. It's a very harmful bill that was reintroduced in Congress last week, and we're very concerned because it would overturn over 70 years of labor law. And frankly, right now, while Americans are trying to get back to work and we have a pandemic still, it is not the time to move in the wrong direction for workers' rights and worker freedom. This bill actually passed out of the House of Representatives last session and last year. And so we're very concerned that with a different Senate dynamic and new president, that this bill could be moving forward this year. A few highlights of the bill, or I should say lowlights. Number one, this bill would overturn right to work across the 27 states around the country that have enacted it. And that's essentially the ability for private sector workers to choose whether or not to be part of a union and pay dues, right? Because we believe it should be a choice. And then two, this bill would undermine independent contracting. So anyone who's a freelancer right now, a consultant, 1099 worker would be affected by the PRO Act. Anyone who works outside of a regular 9-to-5 desk job. And I think, Ashley, you mentioned just how we can curb the virus right now. I think vaccination is really important. And a lot of nurses and healthcare workers right now are actually independent contracting at these vaccination centers. Wow. And so the PRO Act in Congress, if it was enacted, would just put a lot of that to a halt, create confusion over labor law, right? And people could be fined. And I should say not just that people could be, they will be, because we have seen this already play out at the state level in California, as well as just over the border from Pennsylvania in New Jersey.
So, Erica, California passed legislation that I think we could say is somewhat served as the inspiration for the PRO Act, AB 5. And how does that determine or what is the mechanism in the legislation that impacts, you know, the independent contractor designation? I think some of us have read in articles and op-eds the ABC test. Can you talk through that a bit?
Yes. So in California at the state level, there was a bill called AB 5 enacted last year and signed into law, which basically gutted independent contracting as we know it. And the ABC test is a very restrictive test that the state applies to determine whether someone is allowed to operate as an independent contractor, essentially independent from an employer. And I think some common examples are, if you're a marketing consultant, you might have 5 or 6 clients that you manage and that you enjoy that flexibility, right? And California had said, well, we're going to put a really stringent test, right, on independent contracting so that more people would be W-2 employees. And the fact of the matter is, plenty of people don't want to necessarily be a W-2 employee. For a lot of folks, they might have, childcare responsibilities, taking care of an elderly parent, or they like that entrepreneurial hustle of having multiple clients and gigs. And so we've seen in California, almost 1 million people have lost some type of income due to that really terrible AB 5 law.
Wow, that's incredible. And so hasn't the legislature in California actually considered, and whether or not it's passed, please share that with us, but at least considered legislation that provides exemptions for certain gig workers that are subject to this, the AB 5?
Yes, that's correct, Ashley. There was so much blowback from AB 5 that I forget the exact total, but I know it's over 55 exemptions have now moved through the state legislature. So, for example, realtors and others who have lobbyists who can go to the state capitol and try to get an exemption. It's important to note, right, that those are folks who have some type of politically connected trade association, But your average worker doesn't have a high paid lobbyist to go help them, and they are still affected. Also, California voters voted for something called Prop 22 last November, which undid some of the AB5 harm, but not all of it for Uber and Lyft drivers. So essentially it allows for Uber and Lyft in a restricted capacity to still operate in California. And again, it's important to note that there are still hundreds of thousands of workers who are still affected by AB5 despite these exemptions.
That is incredible. So are you seeing that a lot of those, associations or even companies that sought exemptions in California, begin to travel to Washington or scale their opposition to the PRO Act? I imagine that would be echoed by many of them facing this new threat that they've just tried to battle through in California.
Yes, they are. I think the opposition to the PRO Act is growing every day, every week, not just trade associations, but again, independent contractors and freelancers across America. There's even a group now called Fight for Freelancers that are against the PRO Act. However, I think it's important to note that the PRO Act as introduced now and the version that passed out of the House of Representatives last year had 0 exemptions. So despite California's AB5 moving forward with so many exemptions, we don't expect that to be the case for PRO Act, and that workers should know that they won't be exempted here.
Wow, that's wild. So, Erica, what should Congress be considering, knowing that the reality that we have single party control in Washington, and dealing with that reality constructively? What should we be encouraging our members of Congress to do instead when it comes to getting folks back to work?
Yes. So I think specifically with independent contracting, there's no partisan divide. You will hear from freelancers who are progressive Democrats, conservative Republicans that want to protect their livelihood. So it's not a partisan issue. And the current administration can move forward with a rule that was proposed under President Trump to protect independent contracting and also just make it much clearer. Because right now, labor law lives across so many different entities, whether that's the IRS, the Department of Labor, the NLRB, and then the state level, right? It's very confusing. So I think any ability that our policymakers have to have, a standard that is very clear and simple, right? And appreciates the independence that workers want here. I would also just highly recommend our leaders now focus on targeted COVID relief. So instead of bailing out states that have, long-term pension issues, right, focus on curbing the virus, right? So that's making it easier for folks to get vaccinated, have testing, immunotherapy. Focus on relief that is not going to be connected to, special interest bailouts.
Very well said. I want to give everyone on the call an update about where our delegation specifically falls when it comes to the PRO Act. But Erica, can you share with listeners the Facebook group that is targeted specifically to this issue? It disseminates information on a very regular basis about the state of play with the legislation. What is the name of that group?
It's called Flex Your Independence. Again, that's Flex Your Independence, and listeners can go to that Facebook group, particularly if they're independent contractors, to learn more. And then I would also add on Twitter, they can check out the hashtag #VoteNoPro.
Great. So what we want to talk about is the fact that this legislation is bipartisan. And so while at AFP we so often talk about that that North Star of working with anyone to do good. Just because something is bipartisan does not mean it's good. And we are one of the states who has a sponsor of this legislation that is in the Republican caucus, and that is Congressman Brian Fitzpatrick. He signed on early and is definitely, I think very supportive of the legislation as evidenced by his sponsorship. I believe, Erica, there is a member of your delegation, a Republican as well, who signed on as an initial sponsor. And so we really encourage folks to tag the congressman in a few Facebook posts and a few Twitter tweets. His handle is the same on both of those platforms. It is at Rep Brian Fitz, and use that hashtag VoteNoPro, VoteNoPro. We definitely want his office to be aware of the fact that constituents both in his district and across Pennsylvania do not appreciate his support of a policy like this that is going to limit opportunities for individuals across the nation when it comes to employment. Additionally, we have some members who have signed on as co-sponsors. We have Doyle, Wild, Scanlon, Bean, Cartwright, Lamb, and Senator Casey over in the Senate. But additionally, we have another sponsor in the House in addition to Brian Fitzpatrick, and that is Congressman Brendan Boyle. And so we just, again, encourage you to tag them in some posts that you might be willing to create so that they know and that folks can see you want them to vote no. Additionally, as always, we encourage you to visit our Action Center, americansforprosperity.ivolunteers.com. There is right on the landing page a fantastic contact official letter named Protect Workers' Rights, Oppose the PRO Act. When you sign it, as always, takes under 30 seconds, and it will go to the inboxes of your member of Congress as well as both of our U.S. senators. And so it is so important, especially for those of you residing in the Southeast, to get this done, because so many of the co-sponsors and sponsors that I listed are from your neck of the woods. Erica, I want to give you the last word on the PRO Act, but you can trust that in Pennsylvania, we are going to be working hard to make certain that our members know AFP's point of view on this, understand why this would be bad for workers, particularly at a time like this. And Erica, I believe I said it last month, but it bears repeating. Pennsylvania was impacted more by government policies throughout the pandemic than any of our neighboring states. So we had almost 30% of our businesses have to close to some degree or completely close because of government. And so now when we're trying to reopen and re-engage as workers in our economy, there should be no roadblocks. Indeed, we should be doing everything to dismantle those that exist, not erecting new ones. So I'm going to give you the last word, but we do hope this has been informational, and we really look forward to seeing a flurry of activity on letter for prosperity.volunteers.com and on social media. Tag your member and definitely utilize that hashtag VoteNoPro. But Erica, the last word is yours, and thanks so much for joining.
Ashley, thank you, and I appreciate all the work of your state chapter. Definitely a top state chapter for Americans for Prosperity around the country, and it's easy to think about all of the different bills in Congress and the impact would be PRO Act has dozens of provisions that would fundamentally change work as we know it. And for me, this is protecting the American dream and making sure that Americans can still chart the career that they want, right? Whether that's choosing whether or not to be part of a union or starting a business and being self-employed and really creating that lifestyle that they want. So again, this is so important to save and protect the American dream, Ashley, and all of the work that your state chapter and that Pennsylvanians are putting in to oppose this bill is really important. So thank you.
Awesome. Susan, thanks so much for having us. Any final thoughts or questions?
Well, we just thank you, Ashley, and you, Erica, very much for this information. It's really important. This governmental control of the workforce is not something that we want. And so we appreciate your detailed analysis and reporting about this, plus giving everyone some guidelines as to what can be done. And we hope that it will make a difference. So thank you both very much for the work you're doing, and thank you for sharing this with us today. We truly appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely. Take care and stay well.
You too. And listeners, you've been listening to Citizens Bulletin, knowing your role as an informed Pennsylvania citizen. Please join us again next month.